today has to do with the concept of centralization versus decentralization. Our experts today are from different organizations, but they have experience, each of them has experience with multiple nonprofit organizations set up in different configurations. Tim is the head of international fundraising for UNICEF, has previously worked in the UK in a large national charity, where we just heard several people leaving the last session saying that they wept when he left. so he's had quite a bit of experience with large...
With joy? Or
with joy? No, not quite. Mark Vandentville. Mark was with WWF in the Netherlands, which is one of the remarkable success stories of a national office of an international charity that literally set the standard for the entire charity worldwide with just unbelievable success. Mark has now moved on, and he's the head of the Ronald McDonald House Charities, but is also the only European on the board of McDonald's, so he serves both on the commercial side, but also in charge of the charitable side. And Mitch has worked in charities in the United States, in Sweden. I can't even count the number of countries that he's been in, but he's lived pretty much everywhere in the world and is currently managing the global fundraising expansion of World Wildlife Fund. So that's our panelist. We're going to start out with a question for Tim. And as I say, I'm going to be a bit of an agent provocateur. So Tim, the question is this. UNICEF has a reasonably strong central operation. It's a very, very big charity. In fact, it's so big it takes you 8 months to hire somebody. Is size the enemy? Is centralization and having all that muscle and all that money, is that really all that good? Or is it better to be small and nimble and innovative and allow elaboration at the local level, since all fundraising is ultimately local?
I think the first thing I should say is that 8 months is usually a short period of time to actually get somebody on board, possibly the optimum. I'm not sure if our HR team have a kind of target that they work to. In the previous session, we were talking about kind of measuring success, and maybe our HR team actually have a kind of a KPI which they're judged upon. If they can get somebody in the door within 9 months of advertising a post, they all get to go out for the day. I don't know, but it certainly kind of feels like that. Yeah, UNICEF is a big organization. We operate in 150 kind of plus countries around the world in terms of delivering programs for children, and we fundraise probably in something like kind of 60 or 70 countries. I think that's our reality. I think the question for us is, well, how do we optimize that reality? And we can debate as to whether UNICEF is a relatively more centralized or relatively more decentralized organization. But I think our challenge within the kind of UNICEF fundraising team is how do we optimize that reality? And I have a slide that periodically I show when I go around the kind of world and kind of talk to UNICEF fundraisers in different places. And this was from a quote from a UNICEF fundraising director taken from a survey that we did a couple of years ago looking at the whole issue of innovation. And the quote goes something like, "It would be an innovation if UNICEF did consistently and to a high quality the things that UNICEF knows works best in its best countries in all of the countries in which we operate. That would be innovation." So our challenge within UNICEF is to take the things that we're good at in a number of countries and make sure that we can be good at it in as many countries as we can. Now, that doesn't mean that we're not looking for new ideas and we're not looking for innovation, but our competitive advantage should be how do we leverage the size thing, because it's not going away.
I'm glad that I don't work at UNICEF. If I heard about 8 months and we had to hire some people, we put it on Twitter, and within 1 hour we had some response, and the next day we had the person hired. So that's why I strongly believe in local
don't want to work at
entrepreneurship. Yeah. No, but on the other hand, in my period in WWF, and Geoff said some nice things about it, but we were able to raise the organization to a higher level over here because we were local, we were quick, and we didn't have to go with all kind of business cases to an international body and being diplomatic and political correct and saying things at the right moment to find people, to put some money in, and we just did some things, and that's why we created success. So it worked bottom up. So if you have to go to a headquarter, it doesn't fit me. So that's I think it's,
and trust me, most of our fundraisers don't come to Geneva, or they don't pick up the phone to Geneva and say, "We've had a great idea. Can we do this?"
Okay, well,
that's not how it works.
Okay, that's good to hear. Because that would be deadly.
I'd be very worried if that was the kind of situation. We want 1,000 kind of flowers to bloom across the world. Our job at the center is to say, how do we look at those things? How do we analyze these things and say, okay, well, if it's going to work here, the thing that I hear most and makes my heart sink is it won't work here.
Okay, well, that's...
Maybe it's important also to draw a distinction between being centralized and being organized, right? And I think that sometimes centralization can work against organization, against the dissipation of ideas, because there's so much process to go through. But one of the challenges that we face at WWF is that we have to get organized from the bottom up, whereas you have the resources to organize from the top down, and we have to focus and try to organize from the bottom up, because as Mark can attest, spending many years fighting with headquarters in Glan and trying to figure out how to get it erased off the map altogether at times. Sometimes a small centralized top can work against you, so you're better off to sort of lead from the side, as Mark tried to do, or lead from out in the field, which is kind of what we try to do. Certainly we have somebody in the audience here who's from our Asia Pacific group, and those offices who were, for all intents and purposes, ignored to some degree by our central office. It was the rich northern countries sort of dominating the WWF International, and the program offices on the south were recognized as program implementers, but certainly not as markets to be developed. So they organized themselves into their own sort of institutional group, raised money for themselves, and tried to push their development back up from the bottom up.
On the right-hand side, you seem to revel in fragmentation.
I swim in it.
No, let me go with this, which is, you talk about central and HQ, and then and the Dutch are so innovative, and we don't need to be held back by the center. I wonder whether you feel any global responsibility, and how do you express that?
Well, I'm chairing the Dutch organization, but we are a global organization as well. We are active in 54 countries. And what we do, we also have a responsibility to make startups possible in other countries. So what we do, that's the job of the central office. So when we do a startup in China, we put in money, we put in resources, we build up an organization that's able to stand on its own, with its own responsibilities, with its own board, with its own staff. But we put in money to kickstart it, because in the model, in a more loose model, well, you build it up in a more organic way, and then it will take you maybe 10 or 20 years to build up a decent organization. So we put in the central resources, but when it's able to stand on its own and to have an entrepreneurial attitude, then they are on their own and can do the things. Of course, there's guidance, there's a brand strategy, there's a marketing strategy, but at the end, they can do their own things and develop their own market.
My group exists under a mandate from the international office, and the network supports me and commits to our growth. The challenge is that it's the classic situation where you have responsibility for something but no resources to do it. So they say, go out there and grow those markets. And I say, okay, where are my resources? They say, well, come back tomorrow.